Welcome. We are really glad that you could join us this evening. My name is Gerry and I am a first year social work student at Lakehead. I volunteer with the LUSA committee and with a few mature student events that have started. I'd like to recognize that Mercedes Jacko, the Indigenous coordinator at Aurelia, is with us tonight, along with Jackie Kent and some of her volunteers. Jackie's the go-to person for everything alumni and seems to be everything else as well. So welcome to them on top of our guests. A few housekeeping items. Everyone will remain muted throughout the speakers portions of the event. We will have a question period at the end. So if you could hold your questions for then, you can type them in the chat as we go if you would like to, or you can just save them for the end and use your reaction buttons to raise your hand. A little bit about the Alumni Association for those who need a reminder or maybe don't know. There are more than 60,000 alumni, Lakehead alumni now worldwide. And you become an alumni after only 5 credits. So we have many students who are a current part of the family. We do encourage you to stay as involved as you can. There's so many great activities. I know when I saw the advertisement for tonight's, and I just thought what a perfect time for, an event related to mental health, something to connect us with the earth, in a cultural way. So I was pretty excited about tonight's agenda. If you have not received or had a chance to pick up your little package for tonight, don't worry, those will still get to you and you'll be able to utilize the contents of those afterwards. lakeheadu.ca/alumni. That is the alumni website for anything that you might happen to be looking for. And with that, we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce Denise Baxter, Vice Provost, Indigenous Initiatives at Lakehead.
Bonjour, Wachinin. Welcome to Lakehead University's Mishkiki Getagan Medicine Garden Talk with Elder Gerry Martin. We're happy that you're able to join us this evening. Denise Baxter, Indigenous Cause, Makwadodim, Martin Falls, and Donjaba. My name is Denise Baxter, Vice Provost, Indigenous Initiatives at Lakehead University, and I will be your MC for this event today. Lakehead University respectfully acknowledges that its campuses are located on the traditional lands of Indigenous people. Lakehead Aurelia is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, which include the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Lakehead Thunder Bay is located on the traditional lands of Fort William First Nation, signatory to the Robinson-Superior Treaty of 1850. And we acknowledge that the history that many nations hold in the areas around our campuses and are committed to respectful relationships with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples based on the principles of mutual respect, trust, reciprocity, and collaboration in the spirit of reconciliation. I would also like to extend a huge chimigwech, a huge thank you to the planners of the Aurelia Campus Office of both the Lakehead University Student Alumni Association, Lakehead University Alumni Association, and the Office of Indigenous Initiatives. We had, as mentioned, some really great packages that were sent out on behalf of LUSA. So before we begin tonight, I would just like to reiterate that all participants will be muted just to ensure seamless continuity throughout the event. At about 7:45, we'll have a question and answer section. So I invite you to put your questions in the chat, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask those questions from Elder Gerry Martin. Also, just a note that tonight's event is being recorded, so you should be able to access this talk later on our YouTube channel. So it is now my greatest pleasure to introduce Elder Gerry Martin. Gerry Martin served for many years on the Elders Council, and while he doesn't hold that role any longer, he has dedicated his time and energy to the students of Lakehead University as one of the elders in residence. And right now he's seeing students virtually. So if you would like to see more of Gerry after tonight, you can check our website out to visit him in that way. Gerry is from Matagami First Nation over in the northeastern part of Ontario. He is a former nurse and student of traditional Indigenous healing methods. He enjoys teaching and sharing knowledge of these healing methods and considers it a lifelong journey to learn more. He provides traditional counseling, knowledge of medicine, history, art, and storytelling to the students at Lakehead University, Confederation College, KCATS, and Matawa First Nations Management. Today, he'll be sharing some of his knowledge on medicines, plants, and tobacco. And I had to, with these days of social distancing, I left tobacco for him in his mailbox to accept our invitation to share his teachings and knowledge with us this evening. So I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Elder Gerry Martin. Welcome.
Bonjour, miigwech. I am Wapshish Woshishan Indinikas. Matagami Shkoni Gonadonji, Makwa Totem, Maskidi in that's pretty good for now. I'm a gardener. I like teaching, particularly traditional stuff about gardening. Denise is modest. Her mom is also a very good gardener. We've worked on projects in the city. And so she has an interest in it, growing up in it. And been involved in a number of projects, particularly here in the city of Thunder Bay, but not only Thunder Bay. When I was in Timmins with the Waban Tribal Council, I encouraged gardening for the communities, our communities. And I still encourage it for a lot of our communities, Nishnabik and Inuit and Innu from the James Bay Cree, as well as the Métis. We've had some interest, a lot of interest with the Métis communities. I'm having young people learn about gardening again. And I'm talking this afternoon about how many of you remember in elementary school planting a seed in a cup with styrofoam, glass, or something, and then letting it sprout, and then hopefully you would take it home in the middle of May and put it in the ground and see if it would continue to grow. I still like that project because there's so many people that don't know how to grow food, particularly down south. Where Aurelia campuses is one of the richest agricultural areas in Ontario, as well as southeast and southwest Ontario. And up here in Thunder Bay, it's cold up here, but we can manage to get by with 3.5 months of growing period. And one of the things to make things grow, to get ahead of things, is doing what we're doing tonight, planting seed in March, usually February, March, like tobacco, tomatoes, and peppers, and things like that. Give them a little longer chance to grow and fill out and reach maturity. I cheat, or did have. I had a small greenhouse. I don't have it anymore, but that was a good thing to have, to harden the plants off and keep them protected for a while before putting them in the ground after the end of May. Down south where you are in the Aurelia area, that's more like the middle of May, 1st of May, depending how warm it is. Here we can expect frost right up to the end of May, so we have to play it by ear and keep your containers around where you cover them and put plastic over them and whatnot to make them protected. I come by my gardening knowledge from my stepfather, who was a master gardener that worked at McConnell's Nursery, that supplied Sears when Sears used to do gardening stuff from all of Canada. And watching him grow things and learning from him, as well as my from the traditional side, from my mom's side, Otagamie in northeastern Ontario, what our people grew besides potatoes, how they stored them using root cellars, and of course basements. And some people like canning, they putting it in jars and cooking them. That works too, but a lot of people don't do that anymore. It's too much work, and they prefer the freezer in the grocery store, which is nice. But there's a danger in that, something that Elders Council with the National Health Organization, we had a table for elders, and that was one of the things we were concerned about, the lack of interest and knowledge that was falling by the wayside in many communities and nations about growing our own foods, how we did that, how we stored it. So, and I think always try to encourage kids to grow something, anything. And they get excited even if you give them a peat pot and put some warm water, put it in warm water, of course it puffs up and they think, oh, I grew up a pot, that's something. And it's a problem, I think, with modern man has lost his connection with the natural world, natural science and animals and plants and our history, spirits, and spirit of the land. The names, same thing. So, you know, when to do it. Behind me, you can see the poster. We commissioned a friend of mine, Shelby Gagne, to do this for one of the projects we had, gardening projects we had here in the city. It's still going, food security. And we did it from a Anishinaabe point of view with our 13 moons in our seasons, and try to include animals that are part of our world. And I was talking with a young lady, Mercedes, this morning, and we talk about, I don't know how many people still fish for smelt and suckers. And we use that in our gardens for fertilizer. Some, you know, you eat smelt like crazy and then you've had enough and the rest goes in the garden. But we never had chemical fertilizers like CIL makes in other companies. But we did use organic compost and stuff like that. We knew where trees were rotting and stuff like that. And we had a compost. Only problem is it was nice, but it created a home for mice and snakes that came after the mice. So learning how to use that stuff is important. And I think I really miss and try to stress most with students is about that spiritual connection with the land and the plants. And I tell them when they're planting, say a prayer, not for every seed, but say a prayer to Mama Otaski, our Mother Earth, and the spirit of the land to help you, and the Creator that you meant it to, and Grandmother Moon, that things will go well, and that plants grow, and we protect them. We don't kill any more than we need to. We were talking about that, about, you know, potato bugs and tobacco worms. They're very huge. We see them down south. Occasionally we get one or two up here, but I remember that as a boy in southwest Ontario, down by Port Burwell, below Elmer, and it was tobacco country back then, and there was lots to do about tobacco growing stuff. Now it's peanuts, and we're growing more and more flowers for the florist shops in the city. But there is still some lingering interest by some people that want to keep their own gardens. You know, maybe an acre for a family of 4 is sufficient. Be willing to work for it for watering. That's always a concern. And yeah, know what grew there before, because I wanted to dispel the myth that history is often taught, modern man is often said, well, Indigenous people and waited until we got here. The mailman from the east to teach us about gardening. And I know a professor from the University of Manitoba, he says, nothing could be farther from the truth. He says, he loves looking for evidence along the Red River and Assiniboine River in the, it's a clay kind of thing, which the shelves or layers of earth, finding evidence of gardens, animals and stuff, 700 to 900 years old. And so it was long before European contact, indigenous people we were gardening, things that we grew, trading with rivers like Red River going down into the northern part of the States and over by Duluth, and then hopping over to the headwaters of the Mississippi and going all the way down the Mississippi and trading with people down south. And then bringing it back up. We were I guess the curators, the keepers of the knowledge of maple syrup. And because the evidence has shown from digs that we were the ones that had consistently had cavities from this maple syrup sugar. So, but we also traded with people from the Mexican Gulf that had things, and we'd meet down there and bring the stuff back up from us. So where we are in the northern part of Kitchikumishigaga, which is known as Superior, is the northern limit of the warm, hot weather plants like squashes and tobacco. And so I play around with that Three Sisters planting technique. Sometimes we get it in soon enough, and sometimes not long enough growing season. But it's a good challenge to grow beans and corn and squash together in a traditional manner. So up here, it depends where you're growing, whether you're growing a community garden, little personal garden, or a patio garden. Know what you're going to grow. Find out approximately how many days you have for a growing season. We have about 90 days up here in Thunder Bay, give or take 2 weeks. So, 90 to just over 100 days. Down south where you are in Aurelia, there's just a lot more. You've got about 2 to 4 weeks more of growing time. But the same challenges are there. Like right now, people should be putting in their warm weather plants like tobacco, pepper, and tomatoes, and some other things, herbs, if you want them to grow up to flower and have fruit. They're little seeds, because sometimes people overlook things like flowers. They're herbs. They're also medicine, and they were here before contact, and you exchange seeds and growing some other stuff. So I find gardening very challenging and rewarding. I like to grow stuff and see what I can grow. So we don't have as much cattle up here for manure as they do down around really mid-central Ontario. But we've got more land, I think, available to us than down in the central part of Ontario. It's all everything. There's no free land. It's all bought and distributed. So traditional species may not be available. They might be if you know how to identify them in the forest and around the old farms. To transplant, and that'll give you, and talk to old people and elders about their experience and knowledge about gardening. So you kind of find out what species group they worked on. Tubers like potatoes, common amongst right across the groups. Carrots, and people say, well, didn't that come from Europe? Some of them did. You had the colored ones. But if you've ever eaten the plants that you find around the roadways, the wild carrot, that's a tuber. It's good. And there's a few others that people knew of that grew along the swamps and around clearings in the meadow areas. Our biggest challenge before contact would be the predation by animals and disease, not too many diseases, but some. Just like we're now seeing potato beetle up here, where it was always down to the west and to the south. And, but it's here, and people talking with Miss Jocko there that, yeah, it's a very pretty bug. Some people like looking at it, but don't like to touch it to kill it. And then once in a blue moon, you might see one of these big green caterpillars from, I call it the tobacco moth. But it's big, big green thing, got a horn on its head. And then we've got cutworms that come from those nice white moths that people like to see in their gardens. But they're the ones that lay the egg, and they're caterpillars. Worm pupa stage is, they're very destructive. They eat a lot. They like to drill into things like peas and into some of the squashes. And they can make a menace. It's not like it's a horrible thing that you're going to die if you eat some of the eggs. It's just more protein, I guess. Like I was telling them, we encourage birds, starlings and blackbirds and other insect-eating bugs to come into the yard by putting food down for them and letting them roam the garden freely and encourage them to eat bugs all they want. And put out some cornmeal around some of the plants because I did find out from Aerosmith that cutworms, they like cornmeal, but they can't digest it. And so it makes their belly swell up and it blows them up and kills them. Also using nicotine bug spray, some old tobacco leaves or stalks and stuff, soaking in water for 2 weeks. You get this nice brown juice or water. It smells like tobacco, nicotine, and you strain it and you put it in spray bottles and you spray that on the plants that you want. A lot of the insects don't like it, keeps them off, so it's good. Also, some of the plants, like some of the squash, are very aggressive how fast they grow, and they put their big umbrella type leaves over the plants up off the ground, and it stops them, reduces the amount of sunlight weeds can get grass, and so it helps keep things cool and moist. Knowing that's part of why I like the Three Sisters planting method. And I do try to tell people to be realistic. Like know the kind of berries that we have here. In our calendar here, it does show which berries come in which order. And there are 3 moons in the summer that are named after the berries. And the strawberry one is the first one. It's kind of interesting. Last one to bear flowers and first one to bear fruit. Strawberries. And the strawberry is named after the heart because it's shaped like a heart, but it's also a cardiac med, a mild one. And it's the whole plant, not just the leaves or just the roots and the fruit, everything. So it's a good plant to eat, store. The leaves are very good for a tea. I like it. And knowing those things, of course, we have blueberries, which I love eating ever since I was a kid. Lots of people around here in Thunder Bay, they still go out and pick berries on the land. I think there's a few that have tried to do it the blueberry farming type method, but it's not recommended, especially if you use those scoop handle things that pick off the berries because it hurts the plants. Not good and recommended to use them. And part of our socialization up around here a lot of niche. I don't remember if Denise talked about it when she was a young girl. The family groups getting together in the blueberry picking area and taking turns going out, and the kids would stay in camp with the old people and dogs and keep an eye on the camp. And then you get a chance to go out, your family would go out and you take turns staying in the camp. So eating blueberries and drying blueberry leaves, which is a good one to have in a tea, along with the blueberry and strawberry, blackberry, upper and lower cranberries. And we also have, I can see the plant in my mind, but I can't remember its name. That the Rosehip, that's one. And Rosehip is a good one. It's one of the central ingredients that I put in my herb tea, along with muskego nibijabo, which is Labrador tea. Trying to remember, I was going to say Newfoundland tea, but it's Labrador tea, the leaves, and you dry them up and keep them in a container that breathes. And that, along with the rosehips, are very good for you. Rosehip, the petals from the rosehip are very good for the complexion. I always laugh when I tell this story because people say, well, that's nice to know. There's lots around my place around the bush. And I said, good, well, harvest some, but don't take them all. And this one girl says, well, how many do you have to eat? And I paused for a moment, looked at him, and I said, depends how ugly you think you are. So there's a sense of humor about that relationship with Mother Earth and the plants, not to be so serious. Those that like to all want to copy this down, and I'd like to write a book about it. And I said, no, you can't make a book or recording of this stuff and make a movie and sell it. Our knowledge is not for sale. I don't own this knowledge. I'm one of the current keepers, and we are to keep it for our people. We can share it, but we don't collect it and make books and sell our movies. That's just not our way. And when you get into herb medicine, not only do you pick wild plants, but also seeding them, like raspberries. Where do you want them to grow? Because there's maybe a couple of dozen raspberry seeds in each berry. And so many animals like to eat them, and birds. And when they poop it out, it lands in hopefully in fertile ground, and it'll take. Seeds don't break down in the digestive system for some reason. And they like it where the ground's been scarred over, particularly around road construction, they tear up the ground a lot. And so if you can get a couple of them started, where you go, they will take off on their own. So it's good things like that. How does it get around? Good survival technique. Eating and being pooped out, you're fertilized already. I like that one. And then there are some, birds are a good companion. So bears love eating berries. Of course, they poop it out and keep spreading it around. I try to discourage students that come to me to learn about gardening. Don't try to control everything. Let it be. If it didn't grow, maybe it wasn't meant to be there. Try another location. Keep trying until you find what's right. Because when we do the traditional medicines like sage, they have those little gray pods on some of the plants when they're mature. And it's just like tobacco pods inside those brown tobacco pods that we grow, and we let it go to maturity. There's a couple of hundred seeds in there. You're not going to find seeds like this. This is nice. I like wax beans. Already cleaned and labeled and identified, that's fine. But still meat has to grow up from the ground. Um, When you said you gave out kits to people, was it with pods like this? Inside of each one of these pods, there's about, it's like pepper. And I don't know if you can see that. Oh, I don't have to come up. All those little black things are very small. It's probably close to 100 in there. That's just from one pod. And out of that, maybe 90% won't take, but 10% do produce new tobacco plants, which you have to nurture and take care of. Tobacco plant is a warm weather plant. And I always joke about this one because back in the early 60s, when we had our own gardens, we lived on about 2.5 acres out in the country. And one was sort of shady garden, the other one was out in the sun. And the tomatoes some like the shady one, some like just the bright sun. You have to water them on. And my dad says, if you can grow tomatoes and grow tobacco, because they kind of like the same kind of ground and weather. Well, that's good. As well, he says, because of the hippie then back in the 60s, he says, you also can grow marijuana, but we're not going there. Because it was still illegal back then, but we knew about it. Aboriginal people around the Caribbean, they knew about it. They used it for medicine for themselves as well as their horses. So it does have a medicinal quality to it, besides being hallucinogenic that a lot of young people like. So I always get asked if you say that about tobacco and marijuana. I said, do you know anything about magic mushrooms? Yeah, I've seen them. Where they grow and what they look like. Oh, do you ever do classes on it? Can you teach us? And I said, no. I stay away from those things. I'm not into abusing Mother Earth. Nature is handmaiden of creator. We sort of look at it like grandfather's sky and sun, grandmother moon. There's 13 moons in this calendar here. We have them named by our Anishinaabeg names that we use here around the Thunder Bay area. Other tribes also can remember this, also do the same thing. And it relates to nature. I mean, it's like the month of March on the Gregorian calendar from Europe. March is named after the god Mars, which is Greek, Roman Greco kind of thinking. For us, March is Sisibakwat Jesus. It's a maple sugar moon. And Sisibakwat means, if you understand the language, it moves. Like if you put brown sugar there and it moves down, that's Sisibakwat. And you put that on the moon. And it's a time when for about 4 to 6 weeks, you can make syrup. It comes on a little bit slow, and then it comes on like gangbusters, and then it starts to peter out. It takes a lot of work, make fire, tap the trees, gather the sap, put it in a container and boil it down. It takes a long time to boil it down. I think I always sort of figured it was about like 4 gallons to make 1 gallon of syrup or less, until you got the sweetness you wanted. And for me, one of my greatest sweetnesses that I like is maple syrup put on clean snow. I still see people do that. When kids go out to school to visit the sugar bush, and they usually clean off the snow and pour a little maple syrup on there when it's hot and let it cool, and it becomes like toffee. And you chew on that for a while. And for me, that's one of the best sweets in the world. So using that in a good way, that moon is what we call that season by clock. These is when we make syrup and contain it. I think we use that for trading with the niche from south of us across the Great Lakes and to the south down the Mississippi River. And we had good furs to trade also. They in turn traded things like corn and beans and peas and roots that we brought up and tried to grow them. Some of it took, some of it didn't. But that's how our agricultural thing, I really like to dispel the myth that we didn't know anything about gardening. We learned it from Europeans. We are way ahead of them. We grew what we could grow in this climate. We knew the plants, when and where. I like the Haudenosaunee, the Mohawk Nation, that Iroquois group. They knew when to move the gardens, move around on the land and let it rest for a while. We did also, but we just picked up and moved to the next river or something. But most of the indigenous tribes in Turtle Island were, we moved. Very few stayed there forever. They might stay 10 years, maybe 15, but then the ground's getting used up and you need to find some fresh soil and start over again. And you moved around on your land and your territory. It takes a lot to support a lot of people. And men, we were the ones that did a lot of the muscle work of taking down trees, burning them, preparing the ground. And then once it was ready, the women came out with the children and they prayed and planted the seeds and looked after it. And the men and children kept the animals off the land, chased away the deer and rabbits and stuff that wanted to eat the seedlings. And it takes a bit of work and effort, but it was good. Just like those of us who grew up cleaning fish when we were kids, the smell or the suckers or whenever there was a run of stuff and we got fish. But the smells from the when everybody said, oh yeah, I remember that with my spoon and having to clean the guts up. And we kept the guts and everything. Sometimes we would eat the eggs, particularly from trout, pike, or any of this fish. I still remember that, not like it was my uncle that got me on that. And you may not have gotten it, your parents may have done it, or you may have grandparents that still like to eat fish eggs. I'm going to remind me of that question later, Mark. I see your question there. That was good. So we had to eat what we could get. I'm not sure why some of the scientists say, nutritionists saying, well, there's studies, you couldn't have been very healthy or survived on rabbit only, but yet that's what we ate mostly rabbit. And the animals that ate the green stuff. So there's fish, you know when the fish are coming, and to be at the rapids or where the fish spawn, to be there to get your fair share. It was there, and then leave the fish alone and just take them as you need it. And introduced species like salmon are aggressive, but they're not the only salmon. We've had, of course, the brook trout, rainbow trout, speckled trout, white lake trout. Yeah, that's the big one. I'm trying to think of others that we have that are splake. That's a introduced species. It's a hybrid trout. And the oil and the fish eggs and the skin were used for things. And of course, the meat is really good. Oh, okay, let's keep that question about the seasons. There's 4 of them. And this calendar recognizes that the 4 seasons. And we have what they call the lunar calendar, much like Asians, people in Africa, South America, and other places where they rely on a lunar moon, not the Gregorian calendar. And with us, it's not a specific date, either for spring or fall. Those two important ones at the opposite ends of the equinox is looking at the moon, see where it is, when it is, looking at the trees, watching the buds come up or not come up, the animals coming up from the ground, waking up from their hibernation, the waterfowl coming back, the ducks and geese and loons and all that stuff. All of those, they start coming back up. And that plays into that question that was there about climate warming. Yes, it does impact it. And I think what we're seeing this year, at least here in Thunder Bay, we got a lot of cold weather in February, a lot of snow. And oddly enough, it's not an unusual amount. It's sort of normal, seasonal norms. We've gotten used to being warmer and less snow. But now we've got a normal kind of winter, which impacts on water runoff in the springtime. And the clouds, the more clouds that we have, seems to keep the heat in, but also changes the amount of rain we'll see and how fast we warm up and how fast we cool off. More clouds around. It has influences and will continue to influence us. But myself and other elders tried to remind our young people, this isn't the first time this has happened. It's the first time you've experienced it, because I don't know if there are many people in our room that remember the Dust Bowl, the drought, depression, and even the warriors. When I asked people about that, when I was in nursing, about what did they do for food and that, they said, no, we just didn't eat as much store-bought food. We ate more fish and lived off the land more, which was good. It was healthy. But for those that lived in the city, urban centers, it was very hard. People were malnourished, and they, like anytime, they would turn to eat their cats and dogs and pets, their cattle and all that stuff. And I think people kept that memory, but a lot of them, like I said, have forgotten how to grow that. But those that kept the farms had their, the gardens raided a lot. And that still happens by people who too lazy or don't know how to grow their own gardens. That's why it's an empowerment thing for your cognition about what you know you can grow. Even though you may live in the city and been in there for 5 years, doesn't mean that you get a big pot of dirt and grow a tomato plant. And that'll make you feel like it's still connected. It still grows. I still got it. Or you say, oh, I have to go down the corner store and buy my vegetables now. Pretty expensive. Rather than growing 1 or 2 plants and having them, when they come on and being fruitful, there's usually a lot more. You're eating it all the time. You have to figure out what do you do with your surplus. We have freezers now, boil them, blanch them, put them in the freezer, and work on it during the cold weather months. We don't have the weather and the right climate and ground for citrus fruits, but we do have rosehip. And rosehip, the pulp of the rosehip bud itself is where we have the vitamin C, just like oranges and that. And then vitamin E is in the seeds that are in the pulp. That's one of the ingredients I use in my herb tea. And I did hear from seniors in my community, elders, they did eat rosehip during the winter, spring for energy, and an herb tea to replenish their energy. And so they were just collected out in the bush. You can identify it, and even in the winter, when it's under the snow, you can pick 1 or 2 what you need and make your tea. But there's an awful lot of people out there that don't know it. You say, rosehip. Muskego nibijabo. It's muskeg tea. Labrador tea. Oh, I think I know which one that is. But a lot of us that are in the bush walking around all the time, we know that. We identify wild strawberry plant. They're small, but their berries are really strong. And I think, I don't know, I think to get some nutritionists and scientists to compare those little wild strawberries to those great big fat Paris strawberries that we see in the store. They're full of water. But those little guys, they're really juicy and very tart and with a lot of taste to it. And I don't know if the modern one's any better than the traditional ones that grow on the ground naturally. And the blueberries, I definitely like wild blueberries over the farmed ones. Again, it seems like there's more water in them. Nutrition wise, I think that you can't beat the wild ones. There's blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, and the other berries, choke cherries, high and low bush cranberries. Those are good. Dried up. Some people sort of turned onto them with their salads, sprinkling that around. So I think that you've got to just turn to people that are the gardeners, like Denise's mom is a good gardener. She knows a lot of stuff. People like me and my dad who's passed on, but people that know gardening to get you started.
Regrets, Elder Gerry. That's a great segue because here's my next and maybe first question for you. We had with your friend, Dr. Peggy Smith, who manages our garden in Thunder Bay. She harvested all the tobacco seeds that you will have received in your packages from Lusa. And so when they're very teeny tiny seeds, could you give us some directions on how to plant those, where in the house is the best place to keep them, how much water they might need, and when we would think about transplanting them to a bigger container and then out into the garden?
When I do it at home, thinking about whether I want to grow tobacco this year or not. They take up space because of big leaves and tall. But think about maybe only a 10% success rate where things, if you put down 100 seeds, you only get maybe 10 that'll turn into plant seedlings. So that's okay. If you're only going to grow 2 plants, so that the other one's small and just let them grow out their life naturally, or put them in composting. And like I said, I showed you the pot that I took from tobacco plant. There's another way you can do it if you take these nice black plastic dishes that a Chinese food come in. I like them, and putting in ground a mix of potting soil and Miracle Grow, 50-50. That's a pretty good mix. Making sure the soil is wet, pretty moist. Flatten it down hard with something flat. And then just very lightly sprinkle the seeds all around in there. Now, it may get thick and they're going to have 2 that grow beside each other, or 3, and that's okay. And you take your spray bottle and because if you use them pour, you're going to wash the seeds out. And then when you've got them moist, you keep doing that, and maybe sprinkle just a little bit more of your potting soil mixture on top of it. They like sunlight, so maybe facing the southwest or the southeast, depending how much light you get. You want to have about a minimum of 6 hours of sunlight a day. More sunlight right up to 12 hours is good. You don't want to bake them. You have to be careful with greenhouses. And make that spray bottle spraying them, keep them moist so they don't dry out too much. And I don't know if some of you, like me as a gardener, what I do is I stick my finger in the soil and I can tell by the depth where the moisture is. If I can feel moisture for my first knuckle, it's okay. If I go down 2 knuckles, it's very okay. And 3, I'm like putting too much water in there. The reverse is true, that the top soil is that dry. Shouldn't be, not if you got seedlings in there. You want to keep it moist. It's just like keeping a moist blanket over top of your head so you don't get sunburned. But you don't want them swimming or living in water because they're not water plants. And if the seeds do germinate and grow, you can pick one out, get a nice handy dandy tweezers and pick it out, or just pull back the dirt a little bit, take a look at the plant and see the root system is. If it's got most plants, seeds, when they go down, they have a shooter that goes down, straight down, and then it put branches off a couple at the secondary level. And this is when you want to consider transplanting, when the next roots come out, the third ones. They're a little smaller, and I call them hairy roots. And they're very fine, and they grow all over the place. If you're going to transplant them, don't just take the whole soil and everything and put them in the pot, a new pot. Don't pull them, because those little ones roots are so tender and soft, they'll break off. It'll damage and stress the plant. So that's a skill in itself, when to transplant them and how to transplant them. Or you can put them in peat pots, 2 seeds at a time in the middle. And when they both sprout, that's good. And when they come up with their second leaf, the first leaf, that's just a fall away. It's just a false leaf. And same thing with the second one. It could be real or it could fall away. When you've got the third leaves, okay, this is where you're going to put this little transplant now into a bigger pot, like a 4-inch pot, and make sure just up to where the new third level leaf is. And that'll be its home for the year. Put it in the ground, keep it moist. Break the side of the pot if you want when you put it in the ground so it can grow out of the pot. It's fine. That's why I use peat, because it's porous and it's easier for the roots to grow up. I've seen people go to great ends to pick it up and get it nice, and they wash it in water, and they've got this nice root berry system, and then they put it down on the ground like that, and then they go. This will break the roots off for sure. Too much stress, and you can't see those other little 4th layer roots, just like hair in our skin on those 3rd level, and they've lost a precious part of its nutritional intake system. They need those hairy roots to to take in nutrients from the ground. They need the bigger secondary roots that hold it in the ground, and also supply stuff and store moisture in there somewhat, and nutrients. Some people put powder fertilizer. I don't recommend it. Use compost soil, biodegradable plant stuff. That's good enough for fertilizing when they're that small.
Great, thank you. We're almost out of time, but we have a few questions if I could rapid fire them to you.
Yep.
Just so we can get through them. Somebody asked if the cornmeal would attract mice that might damage the crops.
I haven't had problems with mice, but nothing that most trap would take care of.
Okay, fair enough. The question about the seasons recognized by the Anishinaabe, and how do you differentiate between them, or is there a significant side tied to each season? And I know you had the calendar, the lunar calendar behind you.
Ziguan, or spring. If you know the Aztec calendar and the lunar calendar, there's the winter equinox and the summer equinox, and it changes somewhat. If you know anything about the planet wobbles and it spins around like crazy. And so it moves. And then we've got at a 90-degree, give or take a degree or two, the summer, spring, that equinox where it goes into autumn, and then winter. And it's based on medicine wheel teaching. The medicine wheel, the first one is springtime, infancy, rapid growth. Youth or childhood, that's the second one. And the third season, youth to adult. And then the fourth season, of course, is winter. Seniors. Not all seniors are elders. So there's the four seasons, how Mother Earth grows that way. Springlet, seeds fall on the ground and take spring up. They grow. Summer, rapid growth. And then towards the end of summer, matures as it gets into autumn, where you harvest things, there's a muck, where things are going to come down, meaning the leaves, and the nuts and everything, and ducks and geese that we shoot. And then baboon, I'm trying to think, the other, sometimes it comes up. Boon. So we've got Libin, Bagwagan, and Boon. They never change their order. They're always going to be in that order. And we know that by the seasons, strawberries last one to bloom, first one to bring forth berries. And there's 3 berry moons right in a row. And that has never changed, as far as I know. Nobody ever said. So when somebody asked about climate warming, it might impact and affect their growth. They might be able to harvest them sooner or maybe later if it's cool. The thing with moisture and sunlight is something we're going to have to watch, but we're flexible.
That's great. Thank you. Do you have a reference or two that you might be able to recommend? And perhaps we can even email the group out after. If there's a resource to learn about identifying edible plants.
There's a couple of books around, and there's a couple of gardeners around. I think your mom does a good job. She takes some people at once now, show them. Right in the city, you know, of course, the dandelion doesn't belong here, but it's edible. It's a medicine plant. And Swiss chard, probably more down south than up here. I do see it around here where there was farms and they've gone, farm buildings are all gone, but you see the Swiss chard is there growing wild. That's still good. All of the berry plants, you can eat the berries as well as the leaves when they're in season. Dry them out and use them in herb tea. Just like I said with the rosehip, vitamin C and vitamin E in that pod, that berry thing. That's the way it is with berries, and their root system still retains some of it. It's not like every plant just drops everything and there's no nutrients, no value in it. There's still some that lingers, particularly in the roots.
Okay, we have one final question. Just wondering if there's a difference in the way a medicine garden is planted and maintained and are harvested versus like a regular plant or vegetable garden, perhaps.
Yes. In the beginning, 5,000 years ago, there is an order in which some of us plant things. Sage in one area, and you got to think about what it means to have sage tobacco and cedar. And the warmer things like tobacco in the south, that comes from the people from down south. Cedar, that grows across the north. And sage, more from the west, particularly 3 or 4 species of sage that we harvest. And then east, of course, would be the cedar, tobacco. I'm missing one. But anyways, that's the order that I follow. Talk to your local elder and go to the niche gardens and ceremonies and talk to people, listen to their presentations. And if you want some of their seed, you got to give a little tobacco. Okay. And for the teachings, the elder, knowledge keeper, get the same thing, tobacco. Be respectful. And don't ever say, I'm going to write a book on this and I wanted to write down your knowledge. That's a no-no. That's just pure disrespectful, because that person's the keeper of that knowledge, current keeper of it. And it's handed down generation by generation and with other elders and teachers to others. And it's not there for you, just for you to make money off of taking somebody's knowledge. You want to write it, produce it on your own? Great. You want to credit the Indigenous First Nation and the people that contributed. Great.
Okay, I do have a couple of, I think one book written by, I don't have it here, it's on my daughter's bookshelf. But it's a traditional plant book written by one of the knowledge holders from the North Shore,
Mhm.
one of the First Nation communities there. So I'll send the title to Jackie from that. And that might be an optional book as well.
Mhm.
But I do know on both in Thunder Bay and Aurelia, we're going to be hosting some in-person plantings for springtime and early summer. So keep your eyes open for those types of events because that'll give you a chance to actually talk with people who carry this knowledge. And Elder Gerry, I was thinking as you were talking about berry picking, because of course I still go berry picking on multiple kinds of berries, but blueberries in particular, I would say are probably my favorite. But yes, growing up, we always had somebody who minded the children. But as we got just a little bit older, we get to go out for little pieces. But it's amazing when you're working and learning with elders, even as small as little tiny babies. You can bring babies. Like I brought my
Yeah.
eldest daughter on a little quilt, and she would pick little blueberries at 8 months old right off the blueberry patch. Like
Mhm.
she would just pick them and eat them. But one of the favorite things that we still do go find is we dig through the same place the blueberries are in the trees is under the moss are the spearmint berries. And so that's always when you get very hot of picking, we'll go right to the edge and sit down and have a little mint break, freshen up.
Mhm.
But certainly those are just hiding right under the moss. And you can see the leaves on the surface, but the berries are actually tucked underneath. So that's probably one of my little favorite things that my father and my grandparents showed us when we were kids. It was just a little treat. So we are unfortunately out of time because I feel like we could have just sat, and I know we'll look forward to seeing more of you and hopefully in person as we get to move around the garden. I would like to also just extend thanks to Dr. Peggy Smith, who harvested the tobacco seeds, which are in your bundle that you received today. And thank you to the alumni, Lisa, for gathering the gift and the package that you received in the mail. And Elder Martin,
I
always
have a
a pleasure.
question,
Oh, absolutely.
and it's for the participants. If we produced a video, we did this with some of my medicine wheel teachings and Seven Grandfathers, and it was very popular. Again, it's not for sale, it's for sharing of the knowledge. If we did this stuff on medicine, herbs, and teas, because there's a lot of people around here that have some knowledge, but no one of us has all of it. And like Denise said, if we normally would teach us, you'd be in a workshop outside and we'd be sitting down, there'd be a pail of tea in there that you could
Mhm.
help yourself to, and you'd sit there and talk and take your time and ask questions. And this is just so short, just not even the on top, taking the icing off, it's still there. And it takes time, and like it's about 30, 40 years that I've been studying herbs and listening to people and go out and get them. So thank you for your participation and your interest.
Thank you. And thank you for the idea. I think perhaps we'll maybe talk tomorrow about that and see. I know as Elder Martin was speaking, we have the opportunity often to sit with him in the fall, and he often will take what he's harvested and make teas for us to share with him and listen to him as he shares teachings with us. So that's always a really special time when we get to sit down, usually in September, and do that with Elder Gerry Martin. But on behalf of all of us here, Elder Gerry, I'd like to just say Chimigwech for sharing with us. As you said, like not even maybe the sprinkles on the cake with us this evening.
Mhm.
And I know there's a lot more to know. But one little bit at a time. And I think the interest today is definitely something that was really, I enjoyed this. So Chimigwech. I would also like to invite everyone here to join us tomorrow for the start of the Truth and Reconciliation Community Dialogue, running Tuesdays, March 1st to 29th, as we listen to 4 Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers share their truths and then learn from activists and allies about how they have enacted reconciliation. There's a 5-part series where we hope to gather and focus on one or more community projects in which we'll translate our shared knowledge into action. And it's a free series. You can find it at Lakehead University under events on Tuesday night. And I believe tomorrow night at 7 is what I have in my calendar for the first one with my cousin, Eli Baxter. We'll be sharing some teachings with the group tomorrow. We do also have a draw. So it is like, you know, in our traditional way, gifting is very much a way that, oh, there's the website. Thank you, Jacqueline. Gifting is a very traditional way of when we come together. And so you'll have the gift that keeps on giving with your tobacco plants, and you can harvest those seeds and share them with others as as they grow for you. But we also have a draw tonight. So there will be a beaded hat by Ashley Lacoutier, who's a Lakehead University alumni and worked as a grad student in Indigenous initiatives a couple of years ago. Ashley's of Korean Ojibwe descent and is from Takwa-Tagamo Nation. And you can check out more of Ashley's designs on Instagram at Onishisin. Oh, sorry, Jacqueline, just designs. And so I'd like to return us back to our host for the evening, Gerry.
Thank you so much. And everyone, it's been such a wonderful session and so much interest. It's just awesome to see that. Thank you again to Elder Martin and Provost Baxter, and to everyone involved organizing. We have a lovely prize, as you're seeing on your screen right now. A draw was conducted virtually from attendees, and our winner of that beautiful prize is Janet Barlow. So hopefully Janet is still with us. I know I saw her here a little while ago. So that's wonderful. So keep an eye out in your email for future events, both alumni events in other areas and Indigenous events related perhaps further to this in the traditional gardens. So on behalf of the Alumni Association and Indigenous initiatives, thank you. Stay safe, miigwech, and good night.